So you were one of the first people into the collective about 10 months ago. I had heard about Manage XR because at Meta, when I would talk to enterprise founders, I didn't really understand this problem and how big of a problem it was. And then once I started kind of diving into it at Meta, you were the clear solution that ended up being where everyone was using. And so I kept hearing your name over and over from founders that I was talking to on the enterprise side. And so when you accepted the invite to the collective, we got on a phone call and I thought your story was incredible for a number of reasons, but it was rooted in you were trying to help people initially in the hospital and like discovered this problem and then kind of ran with it. So I think this is going to be really special today for everybody because you kind of sit above an individual use case where you supply hospitals, education, businesses, and you enable really VR at scale for the enterprise, which is very much needed. So this is also incredible. You've raised 4 million plus, which I think memory serves me right. It was 3 years ago.
Yep,
And you have the ability to raise more, but you've really done this through keeping a small team and driving sales. And correct me if I'm wrong there.
that's right. No, that's right.
Yeah. So 2,000 organizations across 100 countries. Amazing. And your largest single fleet of VR headsets is over 30,000 devices. What
Yeah,
is that use case specifically? Because that one
that's
is
EDU.
mine.
That's EDU. Yeah, and I'm super happy to dive into, what types of deployments tend to scale larger, how they go faster. I mean, I think that's going to be a particularly interesting topic for this group.
Mhm.
But yeah, EDU is a hotbed right now for large scale growth, and so that's that particular deployment.
All right.
Of course,
So
that's across many different schools.
I have our whole use case slide at the end, but I want to bring everyone along so that they understand how you got here. So
Yeah.
can you talk about these were images I took from your company story video. Can you maybe
Cool.
talk about like the origin story of Manage
Yeah.
XR? I think it was called Mighty Networks, if I saw correct on a
Mighty
t-shirt
Immersion.
the other
That's
day.
right. That's right. And
Yeah,
we're still Mighty Immersion Incorporated. So when people sign legal
gotcha.
contracts with us, they're like, what the heck? Who's this? I thought I'm dealing with Manage XR. Yeah, but it's great for my qualified small business stock. So I'll kind of walk you through a little bit of background on me. I studied computer science at Stanford, and I'm very much an engineer by trade. I think I got into all of this just for a love of building interactive media, and was beginning to experiment with VR with the DK2 back in 2015. Um, and if you're interested in the personal side, when I'd say my flow state is engineering, programming. I can work 16 hours without eating and forgetting to eat, and it's when I'm programming. I do a lot less of that these days, as our team has grown to about 25 to 30 people, depending on where we are in our current hiring sprint, and so now it's a lot of leading product, working with the go-to-market team, a lot of customer success, everything in between.
Did you think you would always be an engineer? Did you think you would be an entrepreneur? Is this by mistake?
No, not by mistake. Definitely always planned on building a business.
Good.
Yeah, and that's largely due to how I was raised. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My mother started her own business, so I watched her build that from when I was just a couple years old to when she eventually sold it 20 years later. And I feel like, yeah, obviously, I feel like you're the way that you grow, the surroundings that you're in when you grow up kind of define like what's possible to you, and that always seemed like a
Well,
no-brainer.
what was her business, just out of curiosity?
It was also in the healthcare space. She was building websites for hospitals, and that eventually pivoted its way into patient portals, but kind of a lot of beginning web for healthcare.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Comparable in some ways.
yeah, for sure. And I think that definitely sparked an interest in healthcare for me as a whole, right? So when I eventually got into VR, of course, healthcare was like, well, there's got to be some pretty cool applications for this here, and so that was, I'd say, another direction point. Of course, a lot easier to look backwards and connect the dots than all that. But I think so to speak to that a little bit, after graduating college, was working in VR, very interested in how VR could be used in healthcare. and got connected with a group of doctors at Stanford Children's Hospital. Um, Group of anesthesiologists who, their day-to-day as a pediatric anesthesiologist is to take kids from pre-op into the operating room, put them to sleep, and then help them get out in post-op. And you can imagine through that whole experience, it's pretty traumatic. It's hard enough for adults to make it through that kind of experience, but even worse for kids. And so their whole job, one of the things that these particularly innovative pediatric anesthesiologists were thinking about is, well, how can I reduce pain, reduce anxiety, make this patient experience better? And they use all kinds of cool technology for it. When I got when I was there, they were really into like these Pico projectors, these tiny little projectors that they would attach to the bed. And then it would be a great distraction to kiddos. But of course, VR was just coming out around the time. The Gear VR was kind of the state of the art mobile device.
Is this 2017? Just so everyone's.
Yeah,
Okay.
2017. Yeah. So the Gear VR, I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was a Samsung device plugged into a piece of plastic with some lenses in it. And
I have just real quick. It looks like these are 10 Gear VRs you have here because I can see the phone separate. Yeah,
exactly
we'll
right.
get to that in a minute, but that is a good memory to see those phones detached from the headset.
Exactly. There is some good form function in that. I mean, like in many ways, it's a pain in the ass, but there's some benefits that come with having two separate pieces. So in terms of, how that all began, right? I was working with these doctors and I was like, oh my gosh, like VR obviously is an amazing additional kind of layer here, and could be awesome distraction tool for patients in the hospital. And so I started building experiences for them, so I was in Unreal Engine building a lot of different applications as distraction therapy tools. And the kind of the theory behind distraction therapy is if I can take your attention and focus it elsewhere, you're going to feel a lot less fear and a lot less pain because a lot of those feelings are self-amplified by you focusing on them. And so that was kind of the beginning of I'd say the entry point into that world. Of course, it very quickly expanded as people who've implemented VR into other industries know, like you get one spot to start to use it, and then everyone sees them using it, and they're like, "Hey, how does that work?" Well, we could actually use this in physical therapy, or we could use this as in when we're doing nasal endoscopies in the ears, nose, and throat clinic. We could use this to teach patients that were just recently diagnosed with celiacs how to determine whether a food is glutinous or not. And so the projects expanded into all across the hospital. Some really cool stuff. But as it grew, I was kind of essentially running the VR part of this program at that point. It became just the technical logistical challenges of how do I keep all these devices up to date with all the cool apps that we're building? Now we've got 30 devices across 5 different clinics. Well, I can't ask the doctors or the nurses to be side-loading apps into their Samsung Gear VRs. And I certainly don't have the time to go around and update all these apps, which we're updating on a weekly basis. And so, that it kept kind of growing in that way, like understanding, wow, the logistical challenges are difficult. And so that picture that you brought up, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So at this point, are you in one hospital and you're just managing all of this yourself? There's no product, there's no company. It's just you in one hospital.
Totally. Yeah, I'm a working as a consultant for Stanford Children's Hospital. And I was always keeping myself as a separate entity because essentially always looking, hey, is there a way to productize what we're doing here? And I had a deal with Stanford that any content I built for them, I had a sublicense to. So Stanford owned it, but I could sublicense it out to anybody I thought that would buy it.
Wow, so you really thought this ahead. That's great. Okay.
Totally. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Always interested in building the own business around it. And so here's a picture of me in my garage, literally in my parents' garage. And the doctors I work with still joke with me that I'm living in my parents' garage, which is no longer the case, thank goodness. But anyway, so I'm setting up 10 Gear VRs and installing our very, early stage MDM onto it, installing all of our applications onto it, and getting all these devices set up and ready to be used. I mean, interesting tidbit. This is early days. We're deploying into healthcare, and so there's also like some hardware components that you have to attach to these things. We're labeling them with all types of stuff. We are replacing the foam pads with wipeable pads, and we're attaching locking systems. I wanted phones and headsets to be locked together, so I like had these really special sticky things that and a cable that connected the two, so they could never like detach. Anyways, there's kind of this provisioning step involved in getting all these devices set up. And the only reason I mention that is because oftentimes when you're putting together VR kits, there's many steps to the process that you have to think about. You know, when you're talking about large scale, setting up 1,000 of those is like a serious labor to think.
That's why this was my favorite photo I found, because like you're clearly just, this is the most pure thing of entrepreneurship you can have when it comes to tech startups. You're in your garage, you got these janky headsets that half work, half don't work, times 10. You're doing it in one hospital, it's unscalable. Like everything
Yeah,
about this is just pure entrepreneurship. And I love
yeah,
the photo and I love the story. I think it's really cool. So you
nice.
have that one customer, I guess. You know, they're not technically paying you, you don't have your entity set up yet. How do
Yeah,
you go from this, just a kid in his garage, to having this Manage XR platform where
yeah.
it's systematized? You have 2,000 plus organizations using
Yeah. Okay. So there's definitely some jumps there. I think the biggest one was as we kind of put all these pieces together, solving these logistics, so like the logistical challenges of how do I get all my apps up to date? How
it.
do I
Mhm.
lock the device down so that patients, when they put on a headset, you know, sometimes they want to explore. They don't want just a specific app. They want, you know, 4 different apps. So how can I give them a, you know, some kind of menu that they can choose from everything, but not give them the complete consumer environment of like, you know, the Oculus home screen.
Yeah.
And how do I make this so easy that a doctor or a nurse who's focused on a million other things is able to use this as a tool and it's not detracting from all the other important work that they're doing? And I think that's like consistently the most important challenge when you're talking about deploying XR into any kind of business use case is you need things to be frictionless. You're working with people who have typically never used VR before, and you need them to be able to immediately get the value that you're promising. And if you can't do that, the value promising is pointless. Like if it takes 10 minutes, or if it's frustrating to get in there, or if you have to be an expert in the product in order to get it to work, it's just not gonna scale. And so I think I learned all those challenges personally with my own kit very early on and was solving them with my own kind of behind the scenes back end tooling. And then there was just a moment when I realized, you know, COVID hit. So selling VR into healthcare just became harder, I'd say. And there's also some realizations that the healthcare market is, you know, it's slow to adopt some of these technologies. It's a very specific thing to be going into, and I wanted to build you know, I was sitting on this back end tooling that I realized was not just healthcare. It was every VR business that existed like me at that time needed a tool like this, or they were going to build it themselves. And you know, if you think about all the wasted effort of everyone building their own behind the scenes
Right.
tooling just to deploy their stuff,
Yeah.
it seemed like an obvious niche that I could fill. And as someone who had done it myself, like just experienced all the challenges myself, set me up for, you know, being my own first customer and to be able to talk to other people like me really easily. And that's when it was like, all right, let's go all in. So I think what actually happened is like we were working in parallel a couple of times. I put up a beta website, mightymdm.com. It was the most bare bones thing you could ever imagine. Like truly embarrassing. But it had the 4 key value props and basically my phone number, and it was like, you know, call me. And started signing people up to beta test it. And we were working with companies from all over the world. I mean, we had a fire department in Australia that was using it. We had we had people in London who were doing location-based entertainment. But I think the moment for me was actually when XR Health signed up. Um, and XR Health was a company that I had really seen in the market for a long time already because we were in parallel markets in the healthcare side. So a company that I really respected and was big. And they said, we're about to deploy 3,000 devices and we need this. Um, and so it
So
was, yeah.
what year is that? So you started this 2017, 2018. You basically
Yeah.
ideated it and incubated it under a consulting role with legal agreements
Yeah.
behind it. So it's all good. And then you get
Yep.
to this point where now you have 3,000 headsets. How long did that period take? 4 years,
Um,
3 years?
I think there's one key milestone actually in the middle of those two things that I forgot about, which is we deployed our healthcare kits
Mhm.
into 200 hospitals across 1,300 devices. So we got to pretty large scale
Wow.
as our own kit.
Mhm.
Uh, and so got really familiar with these large scale challenges. And then so that was an important milestone. And for me, it became pretty a hard decision. Like, hey, do we keep going down this really cool kit route? Or I have XR Health knocking on my door with like another really cool opportunity. And it would mean going way hard into building this internal tool into something that we could sell
Right.
and could become openly available to everybody. Um, so and in terms of timing, you know, 2017, I'm in the hospital building stuff. 28 late 2018, I'm deploying 1,200, 1,300 headsets across 200 hospitals. Uh, and then it's 2020 when XR Health starts.
Gotcha.
Um, so so yeah, and that's also when COVID's hitting, right? So there's like all these kind of changes that are happening. Um, that was a big deciding moment for me personally. Do we stick with this healthcare very specific product and solution and kit, or do we build this generalizable tool that all these other awesome businesses that exist in the world can use? Um, and I think as a technologist who was really interesting you know, I was really interested in healthcare, but I was like, at the same time, you start hearing about all this cool stuff happening in education and all this cool stuff happening in training, in enterprise and design. And all of a sudden you realize like VR is so powerful everywhere. Like we can provide value to everything here. So that was a kind of a moment to go all in. And that's what we made that pivot. Um, and personally a hard decision to make, right? Because I loved building content. I loved working with doctors. We had studies that were underway. And we had lots of plans. But it became clear, you know, when we started working with XR Health and a few other people came in. At one point I had another customer come in and said, yeah, we need this. We're gonna deploy in schools. And they just wrote a $10,000 check, just like out of nowhere. And I was like, we had to do no work and $10,000 just came in. I was like, this is just like, there's way too many signals here that I need to move on this. So yeah, that's kind of the origin story and some of the decision making that went into it. But it wasn't
And
easy.
are
I
you,
hemmed and hawed for 4 months, to be honest. It took me a really long time.
say that last part again?
Oh, I hemmed and hawed on that decision
Yeah.
for 4 months.
I'm
Uh,
sure, yeah, because
yeah,
you're changing your whole premise of the company. Had you
yeah.
fundraised? Was that when you fundraised when you made that decision to decide we're going to accelerate this?
I'd raised some angel funding before then, which gave me some
Uh-huh.
leeway to kind of experiment. And, you know, obviously that angel funding went in on the healthcare idea.
Hmm.
But it was when we pivoted was in and just the clear opportunity size there allowed us to go fundraise again. So we raised $4 million with 3 people on the team. And just started cranking.
That's a lot of money for 3 people. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the bank account, you know, going from 5 digits to
Yeah,
7, which is like, holy shit, this is crazy.
one of the
It
best
was an awesome,
feelings.
you know, I think a lot of people here can experience can talk to that, but it was an awesome experience.
Um,
Also extremely nerve-wracking. I'd say like when that paperwork was signed, you'd expect it to be a massive celebration, but it was like a just like kind of pit in my stomach, like holy shit, like I've just made a big commitment.
yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
when the after all this rough times, that's when it actually starts, is when the money gets in the account.
right.
Yeah, it's not fun. Um, That's awesome. And so, so this product specifically, are you being paid by the hospitals and the schools directly, or are the hospitals and schools going through a middle business that then
Mm.
pays you, like the actual VR app that's the end user experience?
Yeah. It's a great question, and the answer is both. But yeah, I can want to walk through. So for those who are unfamiliar, you know, we are what's often called a mobile device management platform or an MDM. Although we like to call ourselves a deployment platform because honestly, MDM only encompasses a piece of what we do. Um, But if you are experiencing the challenges of like deploying headsets into locations, the common challenges that you're running into is how do you distribute your applications? How do you lock down the device so that that device is being, purpose used for your solution? This device is no longer a general purpose VR gaming device. Yeah, this is a good screen for this, but it's instead like, these are the 3 apps that you want your customers using, or your end users using. So locking it down. So, no longer are you in the Oculus home menu, but you're in a very narrow kind of lockdown experience. And it's super customizable. And so like the thing here is like, how can we turn this VR headset not into a VR headset plus some apps, but like your headset? This is now a physical therapy device. This is now a classroom headset that is used to teach math, whatever it may be. Other things, troubleshooting and just tracking devices. So now you have a fleet. Well, one way to do it is you have a spreadsheet, right, with hundreds of rows with all your devices and the information about it. But even better if you can track that all remotely and you're getting remote updates and you're able to see all this information about the device so that when a customer calls you and asks, hey, like this device isn't working for XYZ reason, you can go and say, oh, well, it hasn't updated yet. It needs the latest version. That's why you're not getting access to this feature. Or, yeah, well, the battery's dead and it died 2 months ago, whatever that may be. And then I think another really important piece of this is to be able to remotely see what your users see. So that's a key part of troubleshooting and then in some cases real-time management, like if you're in a classroom or something. So you kind of use our platform to accomplish all of these goals and track your whole fleet. At the end of the day, it's minimizing friction, right? Like this technology is incredibly powerful. Everyone in this room believes in the value that it can bring, but we need to make it accessible. We need to reduce every hurdle into making it possible to actually realize the value that you're promising. So in terms of who buys, your question was kind of who buys. It is either the direct end user, which is the school itself, the enterprise itself, or it is an ISV. It's essentially the people in this room who are building full-fledged products, and they use our backend as kind of a piece of their infrastructure. And it's a part of the way that they package up their product and they sell it. And I think that's an important distinction, and I'm happy to kind of dive into this now or later, but I think there's like when we talk to a lot of different developers out in the world and content creators, there's a sliding scale of how they want to build their business. Many people see, they come from maybe the mobile app world and they want to be able to build an app and sell it. Think about a phone, downloading an app from the App Store. Everyone knows how to do this. There's a lot of systems around it, how to use it. So you get to focus on just building an app. But the market in VR is not there today. And so you have to actually go to the other side of the spectrum, which is we are selling an entire solution. VR is a part of that. And we're solving a very specific problem. And, and VR just happens to be the medium by which we sell it. But we're not relying on you, the buyer, the school, the enterprise, to purchase all the parts. We're instead going to sell you a full kit. We're big believers in like full kits as the way that adoption happens today, and especially large scale and fast growing adoption. Yeah, and I can definitely, anyways, go ahead.
I did a little research into Steve Jobs and how Mac got into all the schools. And he went as far as to go get bills created and then packaged up the computers and then sold them directly, had like tax write-offs to minimize Apple's loss. And it was just wild. But like in a lot of ways, this is where we're at with VR. It's kind of like, how do we just get these into schools, into hospitals, into businesses? Like there's a real challenge economically on how you do that. And so you're an enabler for that, which is cool, and a generalist enabler.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is still, talking about Steve Jobs changing laws, having lobbyists to help fund the work through government, governmental changes or grants and things like that. That's where we're at today. 100%. That's where we're at today. And it is happening. And I'd say the biggest thing I've learned in this business, you know, I've been in the VR industry for 8 years now, and it's a game of patience, right? Like we have to be patient. I think we all jump into this immediately seeing the promise of what this tech can do, but the kind of systemic level changes that are necessary for it to be as easy as selling an app on an iPhone are really significant. And it's not happening as fast as we would like it to, but it is happening. Those things are, you know, VR, people are becoming more familiar with VR, and it is allowing people to adopt quicker. But we're still early, and I think people have to kind of accept and buy into the fact that they are selling a point solution, a complete solution, and it's so much easier to sell when you get to that point. I think that's what we're noticing a lot with some of our biggest kind of ISV customers as well. When you can knock on someone's door and say, hey, like we're gonna be able to make your, you know, students learn this subject twice as fast, you know, whatever that value, that prop that you're able to sell, like that is a very clear solution to a problem. And then it's also so much easier to purchase that in one go. To be able to say, yeah, you're going to be able to accomplish that by buying this kit for X number of dollars. You know, maybe there's some annual subscription fee with it as well. But if you can sell that package, it's so much better, and it allows you to actually go to market and sell. I think there's a lot of folks hoping to kind of piggyback on existing distribution, but there isn't existing distribution. So yeah, owning the product, owning the sales process, making it easy for your buyer to buy one thing rather than buying 3 different things, super important.
So, you know, I think the way that VR started was in the military with flight simulations, I believe back in probably the 50s, 60s, and then has kind of evolved. And I think most new technologies do evolve, generally starting with the government slash military, move to healthcare, move to education, businesses, and then ultimately the consumers at the end. That's kind of like the general cycle I've seen. Is that what you've witnessed where it, you know, it came out? Like, I guess my real question is like kind of what are the biggest use cases today? You said education. Was, you know, when did that become the biggest use case, or was that always there since 2017? And can you maybe give us like some very tangible examples of what people are doing? So if I'm a kid at school, what is an experience that I'm going through during math class? Or if I'm learning something on the job, like what is the training session that I go through? How often? So like really minute details would be helpful for us to visualize the future of where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we touched on a few things there. We can start with use cases. And then I think a topic here is also just like integration into existing systems. So let's start with education as an example. So very specific examples of this. Again, they range, but I'll give you like the examples that I think are most successful are completely curriculum aligned education solutions that you're able to sell into a classroom. You might say, hey, this is 8th grade science or 8th grade math education, which is, I don't know, geometry. And it is completely curriculum aligned, and it even has lesson plans built out. And so then what's able to happen is a teacher is able to kind of pick up this solution ready to go, and they're able to start looking at, and they're able to open up a Google Doc, right, with a lesson plan that says, hey, you're going to walk them through this module, and it's going to, you know, do this way. And by the way, there are a few ways to lay out your classroom. You can put one kid per headset, or you can have groups of kids. So have one kid with 2 kids outside the headset, and you have pods. And then once you do that lesson, you're going to have a worksheet that you're going to do. And by the end, you're going to have learned all about how to calculate circumference of a circle, right?
And that's the package you're talking about, not just an experience.
Exactly. And like that is what's necessary for adoption. And so I kind of think about this like as like concentric circles. The first thing is your software, what you're building. The second thing around that is the kit, right? It is the hardware, it is your software, and it is the management layer, so that this thing can just be picked up and used. The layer around that is like curriculum, like the lesson plan, like how are you going to use this? And truly like serving everything up on a silver platter. And then the layer around that, the final layer, is like this full system integration piece, which is, if you think about, I'm still on education. I was at a customer's like internal conference that like really made this dawn on me, where there were admins, principals, teachers, there were government officials all here talking about VR. And I was talking to a principal of a school, and she was mentioning how, yeah, they were using this career technical education content, and they had figured out how to take these 16 different like types of careers, separate them into 4 different grade levels. So basically, when you're in 5th grade, you're learning about these 4 types of careers. When you're in 6th grade, you're learning about these 4 types of careers. And so it's, this is now being integrated across multiple grades. You're figuring out how to build curriculums across all these grades so that you're going to accomplish your CTE goals for middle school. And then that's going to also feed you into figuring out what high school you're going to go into, because there's actually 3 different vocational schools nearby. And what you learn in those 4 years might point you to a different school based on what you're most interested in. And so like that's true system integration. That's the only way that you get people using VR completely regular and relying on it as a piece of your educational suite. And that at the end of the day is what we want, right? Like we need these headsets to be providing value and be, weekly devices at least. So those, I think those 4 concentric circles are important. And like that, when you've solved all 4 of those, like that's when you have really large scale adoption, and people are finding tons of value. And you kind of have to build outwards, and constantly build all the pieces. But I think this is a really important kind of concept to grab, when it just like, when I think about adoption and I realize like what are all the dominoes that need to fall to make it really work. It's not just the software, and it's not just the kit, right? It just like keeps expanding. Hopefully that was helpful.
I think that's fascinating. I think it's fascinating for 2 reasons. One, it's a great use case that makes sense and it's very detailed. But 2, the concentric circle concept, do you think that applies to all businesses? Like that's something that I think about. I have a diagram actually on my whiteboard, and it says services in the middle, packaging in the next circle, and then passive on the outside. And like basically every business or product I see, I think about like going through that cycle where it kind of starts service oriented, then you put some packaging around it, and then it becomes the passive where it kind of sells itself.
Totally. Yeah, it
That's
sounds
similar to what
super.
you just described. Yeah.
100%, 100%. Yeah, exactly. This is just it's the same version of that, just into the VR terms and where we're at in the world of this
Yeah.
technology today. 100%. But I think, and if I think the bottom line, like the tip to founders that I would recommend is if you're thinking about building a business that is going to market straight to other businesses, and your solution is reliant on VR, how are you building all of that? Like you need to think about each circle one step at a time, but think about them all, because the end goal, what you want, what's going to allow you to just sell stuff, is going to have all those pieces solved so that you can make it so easy for your customers to buy from you. Obviously, the system integration piece is like kind of a macro scale thing, and you might be able to accomplish it with a particular customer. It's going to like be kind of bespoke to them, but everything else, right? Like writing out all your curriculums, writing out all the stuff like that, that is something you can start doing today.
School sounds like it's working well. What
Yeah.
are some of the major pushbacks for business or
Yeah.
hospital? Like when a customer is saying a decision, yes or no, is it price point? That's their major pushback?
Oh, yeah. I mean, pricing always comes into play. It comes into play in education too. But I'm happy to walk through kind of some examples of enterprise. So let's talk about enterprise. Enterprise is a little bit different. I'd say there's a lot of different use cases within enterprise, right? The most popular today for sure is training. So similar to education, but there's a lot of time and energy that goes into bringing your employees up to speed on your specific processes.
Mhm.
I will say the biggest challenge with enterprise is that it is not standardized. Like the curriculums aren't standardized. And so if you as a business are trying to build off-the-shelf software, it gets pretty hard to do that in enterprise because every business operates different. They all have different challenges that they're trying to solve. Whether you're trying to learn how to pack boxes into, shipping containers more efficiently, or are you trying to learn a new operating mechanism within a cockpit of your new plane for your pilots, if you're like Alaska Airlines, for example. So the challenge there is, your your solution has to become more bespoke to specific
Mhm.
industries.
I
And
imagine healthcare is very similar with medical devices, training, all of those
yeah,
types.
medical devices absolutely has its own set of concentric circles, which are also completely different.
Mhm.
That is around third-party paying systems. How are you integrating with insurances? Are your customers paying direct, or maybe you're actually acting um, as like a clinic yourself? That was the XR health model. Or are you a prescribable, digital therapeutic? Or are you direct to consumer, some kind of thing that people pay for themselves because it's helping them? So that's its own set of challenges. Um, yeah.
It's amazing that all those use cases can use Manage XR.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's
Yeah.
absolutely my favorite part of my job, is
Yeah.
that I get to talk to all these really cool founders, and like the people in this room, and discuss the challenges of their particular industry, how they're making adoption happen. And I think that's a value that we can provide as well, is provide guidance on things that we've seen work, give benchmarks for that type of thing, and always build a platform that people can continue to use and build from. The saying that we have in our company is, device management is our product, but making deployments successful is our job. So we do everything we can to make deployments successful. Yeah, it's definitely something we live by, and it's the fun part, right? Like we're in the middle of this industry that is growing, and to be able to be a part of this like flywheel that helps growth happen in every direction is really fun.
And so what are some ways that you're doing that now and then in the future doing it? Are you putting together playbooks? Are you like business developing the customer base and then introducing them to how
Yeah.
do you guys help everything grow?
Yeah, it's more on the playbook side, I'd say right
Mhm.
now. We actually just had a town hall last week, and sometimes the playbooks are incredibly technical. So in our last town hall, like the playbook was like, let's talk about getting devices onto Wi-Fi networks. Uh, because I don't know if people in this room have had this challenge with a customer, but like getting devices onto Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi is 20-year-old technology. It is so freaking difficult to get, devices onto Wi-Fi networks, particularly in enterprises or any large, organization that has a Wi-Fi that's not just like a password. Bill Myers with the thumbs up. So so that's a playbook, right? Like, let's talk about all the different things you need to be thinking about when you're talking with a customer and working with their IT team, because these are the 10 questions you need to be asking. And this is a playbook both for ISVs who are selling into these organizations. It's also a playbook for the organization themselves, because normally it's not an IT team that is adopting the technology, right? It's some business unit that's saying, hey, we want to use VR, to train, it's an L&D department, and we're trying to do this one very specific thing. Well, at some point they have to kind of sell this to IT, or to get them on board. Or they'll just say, hey, IT, by the way, like 50 devices are about to connect to our secure network. How can you help? And IT is like, damn you. So we need to prep everybody to kind of get ready for this. And so we build playbooks, like, the questions you should be asking, the alternatives you should be looking for. So yeah, sometimes it's very tactical. In terms of like kind of business development, we have a part of our platform called Discover XR. And this is something we released about a year and a half or 2 years ago, but it essentially is a place to discover all the different content that exists out there. And the theory of this is, hey, you're an enterprise or some organization, and you have made the investment to purchase a bunch of hardware, and you've
Mhm.
probably purchased it for one specific purpose, right? You've done it because you want to do career exploration with your students. Well, there's a lot of really cool other applications for VR. And so, whether it's in your humanities or your history or your, other STEM subjects, like how can I one click try new things and potentially build relationships with customers, or sorry, with other vendors and kind of add to the value of this hardware that I just purchased. Um, and so we've definitely kind of through Discover XR have built those connections. Like a massive deployment in Kentucky, we connected them with a group that a software, an ISV that builds training for CPR. And that was kind of an app that was click one download, tried it on a headset. Whoa, this is awesome. Click again, put it on all my headsets, and let's make a direct relationship with this vendor.
Wow.
And learn how to use CPR training at our school.
And so do they like as the user or the customer there, do they download a free trial, a demo, and then they have to pay the customer after they've gone through Discover XR?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So we're not building a marketplace. It's not a
Wow.
store,
Yeah.
but it is a discovery engine. And if you think about from our business model, there is like the more that these headsets are used, the more
Right.
likely people are going to buy more headsets. And that everyone wins when the market itself, the number of headsets being used grows. So yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, two more questions, and then we'll open up the floor for anyone that has. I think we'll probably have time for one or two. So let's see. I want to make sure these are good. All right, so this is a little off topic from AR VR, but
Sure.
let's go more into like I guess entrepreneurship in life. This is something that I did it last year where I basically made like a vision board with my 3-year plan,
Mm,
2-year plan, 1-year plan, 0-year plan. I bring this up because we're about to hit 2025. I put a whole budget to like everything I'm spending money on, income, and just tried to figure out basically like map out my whole 2024. It was the first year I did it last November and it worked great. And so this week I updated all of that for this year. Do you
nice.
have habits like this? Can you maybe share like some more behind the scenes of how you operate? What's your operating system as opposed to the VR stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, So I think I do a lot of this similar types of planning. I think nothing too obscure. I'd say at the end of the year, there's definitely like a reflection to just like figure out. It's basically a retro, right? And we also like in the company have performance reviews every 6 months where everyone, I think the most important part of a performance review is a self review. And so that's kind of part of my cadence. But then at the end of the year, I will set some goals. And so the way I operate is I have like a to-do list. At the top of my to-do list are like my personal goals for myself. And sometimes it's like tips, right? Like communicate faster. Like that was my one for this year, was one of them this year. I think like how can I just like communicate faster? Do I send Loom videos? Like I'll often have so many things in my head that just ends up in my to-do list, but what I really need to do is get it out to people. And so communicate faster was one of my goals for myself this year. Something I still desperately need to work on. But so I'll do a self-reflection and I'll leave that kind of goal to always be thinking about, or several goals. And then I think the same thing happens for the company, right? Like we set themes for the year. And those are themes that we touch on every all hands. We talk about those themes and we bring out examples of what we've been doing to accomplish those themes. And so for this year, one of them was like measure to improve, right? Like you can't improve what you can't measure. And so and we need to build systems within our company to measure things, whether it's product analytics or it's go-to-market analytics, all those things. I think it's really easy to not put enough energy into those systems because they're not customer facing, but they're still really important to make sure that you're steering the ship the right way. So other healthy habits, yeah. I mean, I think it's just retros like that, and then my trusty to-do list, zero inbox. My God, if people aren't on zero inbox game, you're doing it wrong. Those are
Really?
my like biggest productivity things for myself.
I think about 57,000 unopened emails, something like that. So
Whoa.
you just respond to everything right away and get it out of there?
Um, Well, I don't respond to everything. Well, let's see. I mean, it's just a lot of
Or
archiving. Like
delete, I
anything that
guess,
doesn't
right?
matter needs to go. And then I'll set reminders. I'll snooze things so that it's like basically my inbox. I have two to-do lists. One is my inbox, and the other is my like notes app. Um, and my inbox, if it gets cluttered, it feels it. I just it's like the correlation between like my anxiety levels and the size of my inbox are like directly related. Um, yeah, zero inbox.
All right, and then last question before we open it up. So you've done all this stuff. You have habits. You have a great business. Are you gonna plan to fundraise as the VR market grows and you grow into that? Do you
Yeah.
think you'll just cash flow this for a while? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it's one that I ask myself on a monthly basis. Like this is like something that needs constant reevaluation. But I think the truth of the matter is this is a growing market, and we can't outpace the growth of the market. It's impossible for us as our company to do that because we rely on devices out in the world. And right now, ManageXR can't go knock on someone's door and convince them to buy net new devices and manage them because there needs to be some value prop in there. And, we're more of an enabler of whatever that value prop is. And so we have to grow with this market. And that's something where I think, it's just a business strategy choice here, which is like, hey, we can build a great sustainable business and grow with the market here. And then we can save, whenever we see that opportunity to, what's the inflection point when we're going to be able to double down, raise a lot of money and go even faster. But until then, I don't think it makes sense to dilute a really lean and high performing team because growing comes at a cost. And so I think, it's something that we think about a lot, but right now building a sustainable business that's growing with the market is what makes the most sense for us.
That it seems like a scenario where you're better to be a little late there than early because there's such downside to going too early into something like that. And you already have an established business, so there's not a ton of issues if you wait for it.
Right.
That's awesome. All right. Well, let me know when
Yeah.
you do raise. Raghu, hello, hello. We're gonna call him up. Let me get
Hey, Luke.
Hey, Randy, what's up?
Hey, all good. Thank you for the presentation. Real quick, my question is, do you have scenarios where you have companies that are not enterprise or education, but they're deploying to end users? For like a training, it could be a training program, but it's
Yeah.
deployed to end users. And that's question one. And part B of that is sometimes the end users have their own hardware or they already have a VR headset. How do you deal with these scenarios?
For sure. So the first one is like, direct to the end user. I think that happens for us, particularly in the healthcare space. So if you think about, imagine a digital therapeutic. Actually, Harvard MedTech was here a few weeks ago. So they're a customer of ours that goes direct to a patient.
Wow.
And then it's essentially that kit is used for a period of time and then shipped back. And so that's a model that I'd say is most aligned with that for our customers.
Madam
And
Katz, just wanted to say,
not sure. All
that's a
right,
mute.
sorry.
Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, and now part B of that question is if they have their own hardware. That is less common for our case. I'd say if they have their own hardware and they're a consumer, they're probably at that point, going to be just as comfortable going through a store or something like that, right? Because you probably it really depends. Are you as a business in that case? Are you trying to manage that device? Are you trying to lock it down to a specific experience or troubleshoot it with at a device level and not just your software level?
Yeah,
Those are
I
all
mean, it's
questions.
generally, in my case, it's more for people who are not familiar with VR,
Yeah.
to give them a better experience so they're
Yeah.
not fumbling around. But
Nice.
but then some people, are okay with VR, but they still want access to the software. So maybe those people we'd service through a store or something,
Yep.
and
Yep.
offer
I
just a
definitely.
a subscription on the store or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. That's how I would recommend it. Store for people who are comfortable with VR and they're a regular, one-to-one consumer. You're not trying to create like a lockdown experience. And then yeah, the former, there might be a model where you would sell a kitted solution to them and maybe put them on some kind of subscription. Like if they really want that headset to be just your app, there might be something there for sure, right? That's a product. At which point having a management system on it makes a lot of sense.
Ragu, you could package up a pickleball paddle, the headset, and sell it as like a training system, and that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's coming. That's coming.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a company who does this. They don't manage their devices, but I'm thinking of the baseball training.
Win Reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think Win Reality or NHL Sense Arena. I mean, the very similar kind of thing where they want the whole kit. It shows up and the adapter is there, the grip adapter, whatever, the whole thing.
Totally. Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
All right. So we'll go through 3 questions, Luke. I know you got to hop, so we'll go quick here.
Sure. Yeah.
Chris,
No worries.
come on up. All right, cool.
Hi, Luke. Yes. I'll get direct to a question because I've got a million one questions that we'll have offline because I've got a brilliant customer that will really suit this product. So we'll have a chat about that. But more of a wider question, really, that suits the audience. Who was the 3 people in that first team that managed to raise? So obviously you was one of them, but what were the skill sets of the other 2 people? So I think that's really important for everyone to understand.
Great question.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was myself, my lead front end engineer, and my head of business development. And yeah, the 3 of us were able to accomplish a lot. So I was kind of head of developing all the back-end engineering, all the device engineering. So I built a lot, but I'd say front-end web was the jankiest piece until I brought someone else in. And they were both, I had previous experience with both of them. They're friends. Both of them were friends. One I grew up with, and the second I went to college with. And I managed to find them both at times when they were slightly loose in the saddle, and I convinced them to join me in this insane thing with very little money in the bank. And it all worked out.
Just a caveat on that. Are you the sole founder and you brought those 2 in as employees, or was it all 3 of you as founders? How did that work?
Yeah, sole founder. The product at that point was usable and we were selling, right? So like by the time when they joined, we had, I don't know, I don't know the number of devices that on the platform, but several thousand devices on the platform by the time these folks joined.
Perfect. Well, I'll contact you after this because I've got a project definitely I need to speak to you about. So
Cool.
Thank you anyway. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please, anyone feel free. Looking forward to it, Chris. My email is luke@managexr. Don, I'm sure you can help send that out. But yeah, that would happy to chat with anyone here.
Yeah, Luke, you're a powerhouse, and the story gets better because now you're working with your friends. It just furthers the whole, entrepreneurship story of starting something with people that you've known for a while as friends, not so much employees. That's pretty cool.
That was a lesson learned in the beginning, actually. Sorry. It was a lesson learned. Obviously the advice early on is like, I don't know if it's obviously the advice, but you often will hear like, don't work with your friends, like mixing family and business, whatever, like there can be a lot of challenges there. But in the early days, like you need people you can really trust. And I went through in the kind of earlier times, I had hired people that I didn't know, and it was tougher. It was tougher to build relationships and do all of that. I would also highly recommend working in person. We are primarily an in-person office, and it's I really believe in it. I think as a small company, there's incredible amount of value having everyone in the same room. Obviously that can change as you grow, but hard to replace being able to have everybody in the team see every other person in the team and hear the conversations that are happening.
Yeah, I noticed. I looked at your office, and your desk is right there. There's the logo of the cutout into the greenery, but you're right in the middle of everybody. So you really took that to heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Yuli, sorry about that. Come on up here.
No problem. Thanks, Luke. Great information. We are very early stage. We're building a therapy, the digital therapy for autism. it uses several components. One is the hardware part is an exercise machine, which is a robotic exercise machine. So it has the VR component. They put on VR goggles, and then there's video gaming, the game part. So as you're riding this vehicle, you are placed inside the game. So deep immersion. My question is, so we are buying this hardware from the hardware manufacturer, who also have the games and the software for it. So initially, we're going to use that, for our MVP, get some initial traction, customers, beta customers. But going forward, would you recommend that we partner with several gaming companies, game developers, to develop games for this platform, or should we develop our own? What would be your recommendation for an early stage startup?
Yeah, so right now the developer, so the content today is on the headset. It's like being developed by a third party.
Yeah, by
and
the
then
same hardware manufacturer
same hardware manufacturer,
that
and
is,
it's the hardware
building the exercise machine.
So okay, so they've got VR applications that are associated with their machine. Are you kind of
Specifically, yeah.
Are you acting like as a reseller, or kind of are you bundling up in a way that's kind of new?
So we are modifying that software, the game, to a different use case. They developed it for stroke rehabilitation. We are developing it for autism.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that I'd imagine that over time you are going to discover a lot of ways that content itself could be further customized to your specific audience, right? Specifically focusing on autism. And then it's going to be a matter of how you're going to build it. And I'd absolutely recommend building it, right? And then is it a question of, is it the current developer of software? Are they going to be able to help you tweak their existing software and they kind of become the developer? Or are you going to be building your own custom stuff or something in between, maybe a different third party?
Initially, they're going to do the work, and later on we'll take over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to a business question of time versus, how much can you invest and how much rights do you have over what you're able to build? Like, are they going to create a competing product at some point if you have them building everything or not? And so obviously you as a startup, like, have limited time and money. And so there's all those things factor into the equation. But I generally am as a fan of building myself and owning as much as I can. But it depends where your strengths are. A lot of people get really far working with third parties to accomplish that.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Naga, can you knock out your question?
I can go a few minutes over. I don't have a hard stop, so we can go if you want.
All right. I feel bad. Okay, thank you, Naga. If you can still go quick, though, we want to respect.
Quick question: partnerships in the DoD space. When is too early? Because when I was working with Pixels, I understand selling a kit, but when we work with partners, you add the kit plus an integration with your partners. When did you guys see you were ready to offer a kit and add those partnership agreements or extra feature sets?
So let's see. I don't fully follow. Walk me through walk me through a little further. Sorry.
So back when I was at Pixels on Target, we did night vision devices and we partnered with other sensor companies that integrated with ours for trial events and demos. They did a great job of selling kits, which I did like, and selling capabilities was the main mission statement. When is too early, and when is the right time for what criteria? Actually, a better way to ask this is, what criteria would you put on partnering with someone as an integration? When is it too expensive, or when is it too early to start talking about those conversations?
Are they helping you sell? Are they like selling on your behalf, or is it like a reseller type situation?
No, this is a DoD type situation. So the contract periods are like 6 months to 2 years. Cycles, and the important thing is before they can even get there, they need to go to assessment events. and you need to do some baseline integrations because most people don't want to be sold white papers.
Right.
That's the main problem with a lot of these products is a lot of people show white papers, and what I've seen work is bring up a POC when it's too early, because I've also seen where you start doing an integration, Lockheed comes knocking at your door and just acquires you,
Yeah.
and you don't even get to that finish line.
Right. So, I mean, I think you're right. You can't sell, it's hard to sell white papers. And I'll preface all this by being like, I don't know a ton about the DoD at all. But I was listening, I think the more that you can invest to be able to build some, sell something that is tangible, right? Like that's going to help you sell whatever it is. This is like Anduril's entire model and how they're entering like the massive defense space, right? Like they have insane amount of capital so that they can build products and then sell them rather than sell the idea of a product, which is also how you stay ahead of like technical innovation, right? Like you have the thing built, it's ready right now. If you promise something and then build it over 2 years, well, like your thing is now 2 years old. And so I think having something built is better. But obviously you have to be able to, have the capital do that and all that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Naga. All right, so thank you, Luke. I always ask the same question at the end of all these. Naga, I gotta lower your hand here. What's your best advice for everybody? Like the one North Star that you think every founder should follow as they go about their business?
Oh man, I mean, that's a tough question. I think there's a lot. Something that I've been thinking about is there's two things. One, like really understand the value, right? Like understand the value and don't go in search of problems, like solve a specific problem and make, if the ROI is there, like that's how you have something you can sell to a customer, right? So I think that's like really simple business advice, but it's also like we're in emerging technology. It's very easy to fall in love with the tech and then go in search of a problem. And that can be just a harder way to go to market and figure it out. So that's one for me. And I think, we kind of stumbled into ManageXR in that way. It was like a very clear problem. And that's been that we found over time. So I think understanding the value is really important. And then for me personally, something I've been thinking about is find the things that give you energy, like truly give you energy so that you can go for the long haul, right? Like, I think it's really easy to get stuck and when you're stuck, things are so hard. And it's like you're kind of navigating through a fog, trying to find the path. And it can be a slog. And so what I do, at times, when things are particularly tough, it's like, find the work that gives you energy and make sure that you're using that to fuel yourself through all the hard parts. Because no matter what, there's going to be hard parts. You have to freaking grind and do a lot of things that go nowhere. But if you're doing stuff that gives you energy throughout, that's what gives you the fuel to keep going. For me, my energy is like talking to customers and seeing the value that we're providing, like reminders are like, oh yeah, like, whoa, this use case is amazing. Like we helped make that happen. And then another one for me is engineering. And as much as I'm afraid sometimes of like spending too much time programming because I have a lot of other things to think about, it's also the thing that makes me feel really connected to the business. And sometimes I just spend a whole weekend programming new things, and that makes me really happy.
Do you have a formal CTO, or are you CTO CEO in a lot of ways? Because you built
I have a head of engineering, John
Okay.
Morgan. He's an absolute badass. And so at this point, I'm like the annoying like founder who's just like, ta-da, I like wrote all this code and it's untested and like, it's like I'm more of a nuisance sometimes. But there are also things that get really instantly added in, and all of a sudden we have a new feature that no one was thinking about. One thing I'm thinking about, like, I do a lot of R&D as well, right? Like I just built a new patching system. One of the one of the biggest challenges of updating apps out in the wild is how large these apps can be for VR. It's as different than every other device, really. Is like VR apps can become tens of gigabytes. So imagine you're updating from version 1 to version 2, asking a school to download 20 new gigabytes across 100 devices on a school network. Like that's a deal breaker. That can kill a whole deployment. So how can we make that update as small as possible? So over Thanksgiving break, I built a new patching system, and my benchmark made it. I was able to update from one version of an app to a second version. It turned a 6 gigabyte update into 100 megabytes. And this is all just like with some, patching algorithms that I wrote. Like that's a huge win. Like making download sizes, 3% of what they were, is awesome. So those are the stuff that gets me excited, and it's also stuff that becomes really fundamental to the platform.
And to your earlier point, having every VR company individually build that is so ridiculously inefficient. Like, why would they not just have you build it and then license it from you? It makes so much sense.
Yeah. We try to build the generalizable tools that everyone needs to deploy successfully. Like everyone shouldn't be reinventing the wheel.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's wild. Those are great. That's a great advice. Find things that give you energy. So are there things that you do outside of work that bring you energy as well, that aren't related to work, that you'll go do if you're having a bad day or something like that?
Yeah. I when I find time, I seek outdoor activities. So hiking, backpacking, snowboarding, like these are things like what I like about those activities is like I completely separate myself from what I'm doing. It's impossible, to not be thinking or to be working or writing emails or whatever when you're doing those types of things. I also love games, any type of game, whether it's a board game or it is a video game or whatever. And so, getting together with friends in that way. Those are kind of the two main ways that I have fun outside of work.
All right, we're gonna let you go. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for doing that with the family stuff today. Like that means a lot. Thanks for doing this during Christmas. Thanks for being a member of the collective. Thanks for literally you're enabling half the industry with what you're doing on the enterprise side. So I just thank you for a million reasons. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And can everyone unmute and give Luke a big clap of applause here? Yeah, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you all. Really, really, really appreciate it. Yeah, feel free to reach out if any of this stuff is interesting or applies to you. But it honestly, Don, like shouts to you. I feel like this community that you've been building is really impressive, and it's awesome to see its growth over time. And thank you all here. I mean, it's fun to be able to come here and chat as a fellow founder, and just chat with people who I know we're all going through the same stuff. So happy to chat anytime with anyone. And if you're based in the Bay, I'm always looking to grow the local Bay network. I feel like it's, anyways, let's grab a beer, whatever it is.
Next Friday, we have Nanea from Trip coming. So if you can make that, feel free to come.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to do a quick lessons overview. You're welcome to stay for it, but I think it's always cool to hear what people took away there.
Right on. Awesome. I'll bounce. It was awesome to see you all.
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good one. Sending the family love.
Thanks.
All right. He's the best. What did everybody think of some of the lessons there?
I'll jump in, Don. Yeah, for me, it was brilliant because it's nice for where I've always been focused on enterprise. So and a lot of the time everybody just talks about entertainment games and things like that. So it's great when you get somebody who's talking the same subject matters, the same sort of like things like that. And I've got so many different things that I could potentially work with them, and it's given me some real ideas. But it's also given me. I was on one of those days today where I just felt like, where am I going? We've built some amazing things. We've just finished our grant application where we've just done an amazing tool, generative AI tool to generate 3D models directly in the headset. And I sat there thinking, but how are we going to sell it? And he's just given me a few thoughts for simplifying things, as well as a confidence that he's managed to raise so much money with three people, which seemed the ideal set of people, you know, the salesperson, the original founder, and the technical person, which he obviously has got the skills as well. So I think from my personal point of view, it's just giving me another little boost that we all need sometimes when you have one of those afternoons, and give him some real food for thought.
Really happy to hear that. You asked a great question. And yeah, you're right. There's the builder, the salesperson, and then kind of like the organizer or the leader. And sometimes the leader's the salesperson and the leader, sometimes they're technical and the leader. He's everything. And you know, when I was listening to that personally, half the time I'm thinking to myself, oh, I wish I took like more serious computer science classes. You know, like for him to be able to sit there as a one-person consultant and build that whole thing out for to 300 hospitals, whatever it was, and then go hire people. I mean, that's really quite an amount of talent. And then, you know, I think he even before he did the technical stuff, like legally, he's talking about, you know, I had the rights to license it from Stanford. So he planned out this whole thing where he was going to go find the problem, go build it himself, sell it, hire people. Yeah, it made me feel like, okay, I got to really step up my ability to do this stuff too. So I find that motivating. I hope people find that motivating as well. As like he's a great inspiration of what everyone can become, and he didn't do it fast. You know, it was like 3 years before he really got started with that business. It was a lot of just kind of service oriented consulting. So I found that part really inspiring. Also a little depressing that I'm not that talented, but very, very inspiring for the most part.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. That's
And I
cool.
found his just trying to find your true north and the pain that you're actually trying to solve, and not getting distracted by how fun VR is, how much we all love VR, but
Mhm.
just being able to boil it back to don't invent a problem, solve a problem. And I
Mhm.
believe I am trying to make immersive films, but it just reminds me, even just in my conversations I'm having, particularly with people that aren't passionate about VR, that I need to be able to be very clear about the lack of immersive video entertainment that exists, and that I'm trying to solve that problem, and that there are people that are clamoring for it and want it, and that it does well in other mediums, and so on. But that was a good reminder for me.
Well, I think, you know, when you showed me some of the views, the number of views on those YouTube 180 stereoscopic videos, that's when I realized there are millions of people out there looking for this type of content, you know, stereoscopic film. And so that's like your recognition that, hey, there's people out there with a problem searching for answers. And so I think the more small things, tidbits like that you can gather, the more confident you become in the problem. He had the advantage of being in this hospital, being paid by Stanford, and then, you know, basically being in his customer's office for a year and a half, learning exactly the problems. But there's other ways to do that, like, you know, finding things online and looking at what's working and what's not across different platforms.
I mean, accelerators are a good way to do this. Well, I should be careful with that statement, because depending on the accelerator you go to, good example is I got into Tech Runway this year, but last year we did Levon Center, and that did lead us to our first pitch competition, winning money. But that development and that progress, I think he highlighted a point, is you need to cultivate an environment to get there, or find an environment that will provide that.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of that was about how you find your problem. What I guess what are some other habits people are doing going into 2025? I showed some of the pre-planning I'm doing for my life. He talks about how he has his to-do list. He's trying to, I think it was communicate faster. What are some other things that people are thinking about how they're going to plan out their personal life going forward for 2025?
I think
Did
staying
anyone
healthy is super important,
Yeah.
right? It's really easy to get sucked into, and it's hard this time of year because it's easy to get into that eat, and then like, you know, enjoy all the holidays and then come back to January not feeling like you have time to go take care of yourself.
Mhm.
So that's always important. Yeah, that's the one for me that I'm most worried about, because I've been so heads down that I know it can be hard after like a month or two of just pushing to pull yourself back out.
I I was getting real off track from my fitness of over the last few weeks. And so I made the point, like, no matter what, I'm going to, I'm doing the gym every day. I don't even care if I work out, I'm just going there. And I can feel like, I was so distracted and focused on something else that I've now lost some of that. It makes me more sluggish. I'm not as sharp. It really does add up. And so that is one of my goals that I'm setting for 2025 is disciplined, active, organized. Like, I think those three things are traits that I really want to work on. So I'm calling it the DAO lifestyle, DAO. And that's kind of the whole thing I've been setting up, is focusing on discipline, action, and organization.
Yeah, I also found the very self-aware note that he made about speaking more efficiently, communicating faster. Yeah, that's really awesome. It's the kind of thing that it's kind of small habit that really pays a lot because it compounds every time you interact with everybody, people in the team, customers, everyone. So, I'm borrowing that real quick.
Good point. It compounds. That's a great point. You're right. Elon Musk talks about that, how like, what's the amount of time you can reduce from having an idea in your head to actually getting it out there? And what are the most efficient ways to make that process quick? And Luke kind of touched on that was his mindset of how he came about with that idea. Cool. Other thoughts around lessons you learned there? Or Patrick, were you talking? Okay.
Sorry, no, just blathering to myself.
What were you saying?
I mean, I'm talking about my the Kickstarter campaign's got 20 hours left, so I'm just like looking at it, like how am I
share the link in here? What are you doing?
Guys, we got 20 hours left and less than $1,000 to go. I'm just gonna shamelessly promote it.
Are you at 49 grand of 50?
$49,000 out of 50 and 20 hours left. So
why don't you just throw in the last 1,000 in profit?
No, that would be unethical and would never happen.
Is that not allowed on Kickstarter? All right. We'll put the link in the chat if anyone wants. Let's all go put in $10 to get you.
If you guys,
whatever it is.
If anybody wants to, you guys could be the pledge of destiny here. Let's go. I'll put it. It says chat disabled.
Should we finish this on the call?
Oh my God, that would be. It says chat disabled for me.
Oh, let me enable it 1 sec.
All right, I'm doing it. I'm putting it in. I'll even put in one where I can't track it. How about that? You guys can get a clean one so you can all just surprise me.
What was of that 49K you've raised so far? What was the biggest chunk? Like what led to the biggest chunk? What was the most successful strategy for promoting that?
I reached out to some former business partners and colleagues, and that yielded the biggest one-day bump. Like people I'd worked with before and had some success with. Yeah. Biggest failure was not marketing it before I kick-started it. Learning how to market the 2.5 weeks before the campaign has been really, really complicated, but it's working.
So you're saying cold emailing and asking for the money was your best?
Yeah, and reaching out to folks who like I knew. Yes, like leaning on like the camouflage success in the past and stuff like that. And like, cause we did Kickstarter back then too, and just talking about that and getting people excited about it. I think I got lucky with the fact that like camouflage got Game of the Year on the Game Awards, like during the campaign. Like I had no idea that was going to happen. And while I can take no credit for that, I still wouldn't be here if it wasn't for starting that up, so that kind of helped snowball. I actually hired a marketing agency in person halfway through the project. Yeah, and I should have done it before, right? Yep, and that has really pushed it. That's really been the big thing. I mean, we may not, I mean, it's not impossible that we don't get there, but I mean, with being a day left and $1 grand, I think we probably will. But I spent so much time building like what we'll build if we get like $500,000 or $1 million. I'm gonna spend all that time on marketing just to get the 50 or 100.
That's a great lesson. I just donated.
I probably spent 2 weeks figuring out like what I would do with $800.
That is one of the best lessons, because founders spend, like when I talk with founders about pitch decks, they spend 20% of their time planning out, should I raise 7 million or 3 million or 2 million? It's like, just go raise 50 grand.
Don, you said 25 and I was like, oh, yeah. 50. I mean, it's a bit like
it's the best. I think that's the best lesson. I just donated 100. Everyone should go donate some money. Let's get Patrick over there. Come on. Let's
Thanks,
close
guys.
this out.
This group
I
has
want to
been
see.
huge.
I want to see this on the call. I want to see how happy he is. Let's give him a 50.
I will lose my mind.
That's awesome. But you know, whatever. You're gonna get there. Obviously, you're so
Yeah.
close. That's
I would never
impressive.
do anything unethical, or anyone I know.
No, I'm not saying that, but whatever. I'll do it. I'll make sure that you get there because I want you to. But that's awesome. I mean, you called your shot. You said I'm gonna launch a Kickstarter campaign. You've been talking about it for probably 4 months
Forever.
now, and like now you got 50K of essentially community focused donations. Like that's awesome.
Yep.
So
It's a validation, right, for going out for more money after, which obviously has to happen now, right? Like, I mean, but that's fine. It's a nice little bridge, and we've got some real market validation. Never shown the game before, and it's been super, like well received, which has been great. It's always a worry when you start showing your baby, you know. So, yeah.
yeah, well, you know, Luke said that too. That was another lesson he gave. He said something about being embarrassed with his first product, and like we've talked about Paul Graham saying that, but I think that's one of the more important things too. Is no matter what you're building, you should not be proud of it when you start trying to sell it because it's so janky, and that's okay. Like that's a necessary step process.
I went to a gaming like sort of like a Seattle gaming event last night, and a lot of people talked about entrepreneurship, and like one of the things that was really interesting from one of the people who talked was like a lot of what you do is editing, right? Because until your game's done, it's like you said, like what do you want to show? You know that it's not going to be janky when it's done, so you spend a lot of time like editing to make sure that you know you're showing the stuff that actually will catch people's eye and not the you know the boo-boos and all the other funky things that are happening while you're building it. All right, thanks. Sorry, I won't hog the mic anymore. Thanks, everyone.
No, hey, listen, I like it. Okay. All right. Everybody, thank you for coming. Next week we have Nenea. It's not on Wednesday. This will be our first one, not on Wednesday. So take notice because Christmas is Wednesday, obviously. Michael just donated too. Michael, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, so Nenea is coming on Friday next week. We're gonna chat AI, and it'll be a very cool conversation. And then we're into the new year, and I already have stuff scheduled out through February. So I'll start to talk about who some of those people are. But a lot of good founders, a lot of good investors, and then at least one where we're bringing a founder and they're bringing their major investor. And so they're going to talk about the dynamic of how they work together and how they close capital and why she invested and all of that. So it'll be really cool. But I'll announce that later on. I won't see anybody before Christmas. So have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is you're celebrating. Thank you, everybody. Steven just bumped it up. All right, Patrick, let's hit that post into school when you hit 5,000. Looking forward to seeing that win. Thank you, Steven. You're a legend. Goodbye, everybody. Go donate to Patrick.
You guys are amazing. $499. That's all that's left.
I got you,
Thanks,
Patrick.
everybody. Yeah,
I just tossed 25 to you.
You guys
Here
are
we go. Let's go. Okay.
I'm just gonna keep hitting that 5 button until
I'm hesitant to hit this. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Patrick.
Cheers,
awesome.
ciao.
See you later. Thank you, everybody.